Okay, so now let's talk about the half angle identities. So we've talked about the sum and difference formulas, now the double angle formulas, and now we have the half angle formulas. And actually, so we're going to talk about these plus or minus. We're going to have to pay attention to which one it is. And the tangent actually ends up simplifying to where you could use this one with it or this one with it. So for the tangent of alpha over theta, you have all three of those options to use. So let's go through and use these formulas to evaluate this. So we found before that the sine of 2 theta was 4 root 21 over 25, and the cosine of 2 theta was this. Now, if we were asked to find the sine of alpha over 2, now we're going to be having to use those half angle formulas. So the half angle formula from that previous page for the sine was plus or minus the square root of 1 minus cosine theta all over 2. Okay, so first thing we need to do is figure out if we're using the plus or the minus. And the way you do that is by figuring out what quadrant your theta over 2 is going to be in. So we know that theta is between 3 pi over 2 and pi. So to figure out what theta over 2 is in, just divide everything by 2. As long as you do it to everything, it keeps that inequality consistent. So that gives us pi over 2 is less than theta over 2 is less than 3 pi over 4. So when I look at that, that's going to put me in this quadrant here, which means that sine is positive. So we're just going to do the positive for this solution. So that's going to equal positive square root of 1 minus the cosine of theta, which we found right here, all over 2. So that gives us the square root of 1 plus 2 over 5 all over 2. And then we can write the numerator as one fraction. So 1 is 5, we'll multiply that by 5 over 5 to get a common denominator, and you'll get 5 plus 2, which is 7 over 5 for the numerator. And then again, that's all over 2. Just go over here. So dividing by a fraction is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So dividing by 2 is the same thing as multiplying by 1/2. And we get the square root of 7 over 10. Now we need to simplify that because you can't have a square root in that denominator. So we're going to multiply both the numerator and denominator by the square root of 10. So I get the square root of 7 times the square root of 10 is the square root of 70. And then the square root of 10 times the square root of 10 is the square root of 100, which is 10. So there's our solution. So now if we're doing the cosine of theta over 2, again we found that theta over 2 is in this second quadrant, which means that cosine is going to be negative. So when I write the formula for this, I'm going to use, instead of the positive, I'm going to use the negative. So the formula for the half angle for cosine is cosine of theta plus 1 over 2. So this is going to give us cosine of theta is negative 2 over 5 plus 1 over 2. Combine that fraction on the top. So 1 is the same thing as 5 over 5. So negative 2 plus 5 is 3. And then again, the denominator is 5. So 3/5 on the top divided by 2. Dividing by a fraction is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So this gives us the square root of 3 over 10. So the square root of 3 over the square root of 10. Multiply both the top and bottom by the square root of 10. And we get the square root of 30 all over 10.